What's up, everybody? This is Ryan here, and you're watching episode number 83 of my live stream Q&A. So, I don't have anything specific to talk about today, so I figure I'll just focus on Q&A, and barring that, I will probably ramble about how annoying it's been to create, to rebuild my old Pos Trainer application. So I'll get into that stuff later because we already have a question from Gorilla Gaming. Anyways, just before we get to that, so if you enjoy the show and would like to see me do what I do better, then please do consider checking out my course down in the description box below. It's basically a course which is an introduction to the Kotlin programming language, and even if you're an absolute beginner, you'll be able to jump right into it and learn a whole bunch of stuff. So it's not just about Kotlin. I've recently added some Android content in there as well, but the whole purpose of the course is to teach fundamentals which I feel are missing in most educational materials on Kotlin, Android, Java, and many other things. So those fundamentals, what I'm talking about is, for example, software architecture, separation of concerns, code to an interface, an understanding of what the problem domain is, an understanding of how programs kind of work in memory space and things like that. So I think it's worth checking out if you're curious about those topics. So yeah, that's basically my commercial for the day. So we get, of course, Gorilla Gaming, who I believe is also known as Rahul, although I could be getting that wrong. And then we have Khan and Adil. So what's up, guys? So I'm just going to jump right into the first question here. So we'll see. Let me just show it. It's been blocked. There we go. Okay. I'm going to call you GG. So GG asks, two parts here. Okay, so I got this problem in the latest Android Studio. Process unexpectedly exited. This is the output, the error that's being shown here. And it looks like, I believe Rahul has added some more information here. Variant.getAssemble is obsolete and has... Okay, so this is going to be a really tricky thing to solve, because what we have here is a pretty cryptic error. So I'm going to ask a couple questions, Mr. Gorilla Gaming. So question number one, have you tried following these steps? So going to, starting with going to File. Is it File or is it Project? Just give me a moment. Yeah, File, and then invalidate caches and restart. So have you tried going to from File in Android Studio to invalidate caches / restart? So this is just a quick, so what I'm going to do is, I'm not sure if I'll actually be able to help you answer your exact question, Rahul, because it could be a number of things, but I'm going to walk everyone through like a typical process that I will follow to try to solve these sorts of errors. Because the important thing here is what Rahul is saying is that the application was working before, and then in the latest Android Studio, now there's a failure, or presumably a build failure. So I'll try and give some practical tips. So whenever this kind of thing happens, the first thing I want people to try this option here, invalidate caches and restart. So you go to Android Studio, File, invalidate caches and restart. So what that's basically going to do is it's going to kind of like, I'm sure most of you are programmers, so you understand the basics here, but the cache is just going to be like files which are stored on Android Studio, and invalidating it. So very often when you upgrade to a new Android Studio version, you will have to do this. Especially I found in more recent Android Studio implementations, and basically it just kind of resets the files. The cache is like temporary stored files, and it kind of goes through there and just invalidates it and deletes everything. And everything starts anew. So that's the first step I suggest everyone to try for these sorts of errors. Okay, so that's step number one. So the next thing I'm going to ask is, so let's just decode this a little bit. So the only information I have to go on to answer this question is just what I've been given here. So it's not too much information, but there's a couple of things. So if I'm not mistaken, AAP2 is going to be an Android annotation processor tool. That doesn't really tell us too much here. And then variant.getAssemble is obsolete and has been replaced with variant.getAssembleProvider. So my next question would be, I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to answer this too well without actually being able to see your build Gradle file, Rahul. My next question would be, do you have build variants? So, yeah. Mike has kindly changed his name from Cyrilix in order to not confuse everyone. Spasibo. Okay, so here's the... I kind of probably need to look at your build Gradle file to actually give you a good answer here, Rahul. Yeah, I don't think I'm going to be able to help you any further than that. Could you just confirm if you tried to invalidate caches and restart would be my first question here. I'm going to need to see more information and look at code because what I think I'm looking at here, I just need more information to be honest. So do you have build variants? Another question. So presumably this was a compile time error. So does this error occur when you build the project? Presumably that's the case. So Rahul, if you could kind of have a look at those questions. I guess there's no way you can really share your build Gradle file, but this is about as far as I can get with this particular problem here. You're asking, what is this particular area? So generally speaking, so AAP2, I believe that should be something about the Android annotation processing tool, but that doesn't really help us too much because I think what I'm looking at is that there's something incorrect in your build Gradle file, is kind of what we're getting told here because we're dealing with build variants. But presumably you're not actually making a call to this particular function deliberately in your build Gradle file. I'm going to assume that. This is probably something that's being called internally. So this is really all I can give you so far, so I'll have to move on to another question until I get some more info. But like I say, whenever you get errors with Android Studio updating, very often you can fix them by just doing invalidate caches and restart. And then beyond that, it's difficult to say. Obviously, like making sure you have the latest, maybe as another point here, ensure you have the latest Gradle build tools distribution. And that's about as far as I can get there. Okay, so we've established this is a build compile time error. Okay. Let me know if you've tried the invalidate caches and restart, and then we can try and get back to that. Anyways, I'm going to move on to a different question. Okay, so I will try. So this question is from Only Programming. Okay, so Ryan, can you please help with app signing key for upload key to Google Console? So, oh, that was a good voice crack. So off the top of my head, geez, that's, I'll see what I can do here for you. Okay, so step number 1, you need to set up a key store. Now, let me just look in Android Studio for what to do. So let's see if I can remember this correctly. Is it a Gradle task? There will be a bit of downtime here because I've got to try and remember. So I believe there's a key tool built in with this thing, but how do I set it? Okay. Okay, so app signing key. Okay, so what you're gonna have to do is, and I have to be careful what details I share here, because I don't actually want to share the name of my key store. Just give me a moment. Build. Okay. So, what you have to do, so there's kind of 2 options. So the question is, how do you sign your app for uploading it to Google Play? And I'm being asked to explain the entire process. So there's too much for me to explain off the top of my head, but here's the basic gist of it. So the first thing is you need to create a key store, which is basically like a file on your computer which has like an encrypted key and it like a password to access it. And so basically what this thing does is it allows you, when you're uploading, so here's the thing, this is where it gets complicated. So one way to do this is you have the key store on your computer, and every time you upload your app to Google Play, if you're uploading an APK, you have to sign that APK file with your key from your key store. So basically what that kind of looks like is you go to, so a couple of things just if this is your first application, before you bother even doing that, uploading, just make sure you've actually minified, you set minify enabled to true. And probably what's going to happen is you're going to get a whole bunch of errors from that. So you're going to have to figure out your ProGuard exceptions. Again, it's been about 2 months since I actually did this, so explaining the whole process in detail is very difficult for me. But basically what's going to happen is your app is going to like crash because this minify, which is like basically it's like code obfuscation, big fancy word. It garbles your code and changes the names, and sometimes that will break your application, but you do want to be using ProGuard. So make sure you've set this to true and you have your application building properly. So before you set this to true, it'll probably work. When you set it to true, it will probably break. And then I can't remember. So when it breaks, ProGuard should like generate a file for you, I believe, some kind of output file, which will give you the rules that you need to add in order for Minify enabled to not break your application. So this is kind of the okay. So this is going to be a lengthy answer here, but I'll try and answer this. So first off, set Minify enabled equals true, and then I think I'm missing. I think you also have to do. Just give me a moment. Use ProGuard, or is that from an older? Sorry, just give me one moment to verify. I thought there was also use ProGuard equals true, but maybe that's from like a really old way to do it. Just give me one moment. App source main Android. That's not what I want. Here we go. Okay, I guess that was an old thing. Never mind. I thought you had to have like a use ProGuard here, but I think Minify, I guess, handles that properly. Whatever. Set that to true, and then configure your ProGuard exceptions. So you're gonna have to Google this for more detailed information. I did it like 2 months ago, and I can't remember the exact steps off the top of my head. So what that's going to do is it's going to prepare your app for code obfuscation. Then you're going to want to basically create a signed APK. So let's hop into Android Studio. So with that kind of thing, you're going to go to Build, Generate Signed APK Bundle. So again, here's where it gets different. So how we used to do things is we used to upload an APK. So I'll kind of show you that first. So basically what we're doing here, I really don't want to be showing this information, but whatever. You need to create a file on your computer, which I basically now have to change because I've shown it to people. You create a file on your computer, which is your key store. And so we've got this key store path thing here. So you can either choose an existing key store, or you can create a new one. So this is how you generate your key store here within Android Studio. You can also do this through the command line, but might as well just do it through Android Studio. You'll need to fill out all of this information. And again, I'm not going to give you detailed info here. You've got to, this is the kind of thing you got to look up on your own and just work through, because all of us Android developers have to learn how to do this. So you fill out this thing and you generate your key store, give it the password to the key store, and then you can create a signed APK. So normally how we used to do things is we would use that key store to generate the signed APK file, and then we would just upload that APK file to the Google Play Store. There's a second option now, which I used in this app, in my Space Notes application. So that's one way. The other way is we have this, The other way is we have this Android app bundle thing. So this is different. So here we're generating, again, we do still need a key store, but what we're doing here is the key store, the application won't actually be signed with our, the key from our key store. However, I think if I'm correct, again, it's been 2 months, so just cut me some slack here, but in this case, we still need to sign our application, an app bundle rather, and then we upload that app bundle to Google Play. And then what will happen is Google Play will create the APKs, a series of APKs for the application, and it will sign those things for itself. So this is the most important thing. Create a signed APK with a key store. So 3, you can either upload signed APK or upload an app bundle. So I would suggest to everyone probably prefer this new option, but understand that it one of the consequences of uploading an app bundle that I ran into is, so I was using an application which was registered with Firebase, and having to deal with this app bundle just made things extra complicated. So this is the basic process. Now, each time you want to, then you need to log into the console. I'm not going to log into my console. Sorry, I'm just not going to do that right now. But then you log into your console, go to like the APK tab or whatever it is, and then you can select either your bundle or your APK and upload it from there. But this is really the most important. These steps are really important here. You can pretty much figure the rest out. The documentation is pretty clear. But yeah, you're going to need to make sure code obfuscation is set up. Create a signed APK with a key store, and you can use the Android Studio's built-in tool to generate the key store. Key store is like just a file which has some encrypted key on it, and you need that thing to basically keep uploading your application, and then you're good to upload. So hopefully that gives you some information. Anyways. Okay, let's see what's next. Okay, so only programming has an error with, so again, a Gradle error. It's going to be one of these kinds of episodes where I get random errors instead of like software architecture questions, but that's okay. Okay, so Gradle module version 5.41, NDK version is unknown. Yeah, I don't have a good answer for that, unfortunately. I can't say I've gotten that error. Native development kit version is unknown. Yeah, I don't have a frickin' clue on that one. Sorry, man. So Grill asks, where can I share my problem in the description? So if you have your project in a repository, a public repository, you could send it over. I don't know what else to do easily with the time that we have. Oh, okay, so only as a follow-up to this question, only is having issues with Firebase and the uploading the APK. So yeah, I'm going to be honest here, that was the worst part about using the new Upload app bundle is with Firebase, is you need to upload the thing to the app bundle, to the Play. You need to upload your app bundle to the Play Store, and then I believe somewhere in the console, the Play Store console, a new key will be generated, and then you need to add that key, I think it's like a hash key, to Firebase. And then if you're using, I was using a Google sign-in provider as well, that thing also needed to be added to Google Services console. So in order to configure that, you have to, so the first step is upload your app to just trying to think now. Yeah, it was really tricky. So you upload your app bundle, I believe, And then I think maybe what you need to do is some key is generated in the console. Then you add that to Firebase and also Google Play Services if you're using that. Not Google Play Console, but the Play Services thing if you're using sign-in provider. And then you need to like generate a new, what's it called? The XML file generated in Firebase. I can't remember the name of it. What was that stupid thing called? It's just the configuration file which is generated in Firebase. The name's escaping me, but you should know exactly what I'm talking about. It's like playservices.xml or something. It just contains, it's actually a JSON file rather, sorry. And it contains your configurations. So once you've already added the hash key from the Play Store into Firebase and then Google Play Services if you're using that, then you get the new Google Services.json, I think it's called. Add that back into your project, and I think you need to re-upload the project. I went through what you're going through, and it was really annoying. It took me like 2 days to figure it out, but basically you need everything configured together. I can't take you through that process because A, I've clearly forgotten it, and B, I'm not going to open up my Play Services console for everyone to see. But yeah, it's horrible, and I wish you luck. Okay, so what else have we got here? So Mike asks, I have a question about testing. Sorry if it's kind of dumb. No, this is not a dumb question at all. Not at all. So how do I test MVP/MVVM project? Do I test separately view, presenter, and data manager? Do you mind showing the simple example on a real project? So okay, so here we go. So I'm just buffering how to introduce this concept. What I'm going to do is I'm going to open up a pretty simple repository. And we'll get started from there. So this repo is called Kotlin Mvp Calculator. So the reason why I'm hesitating to answer your question is because whenever we get into the domain of testing, you're going to hear a lot of different opinions. You're going to see a lot of different frameworks, and you're going to see a lot of different approaches on testing. So what I can share with you now is my approach to testing, which has certain nuances which not everyone agrees with, and I don't agree with a lot of other people's approaches to testing. So what I'll try to do is give you some background information. Now, before I do this, I have to know, Mike, what is your experience with testing? Have you ever written tests before, like JUnit tests? Because if you haven't, then I actually need to explain that kind of in a bit of detail. And I'm going to assume that is the case. So if you could let me know ASAP on that, that would be great. What is your previous experience with testing? And if it's nothing, then that's okay. It just means I'll answer the question a little bit differently. So anyways, I'm just going to run a quick, I'm not even sure if it actually inserts an ad here, but I'm just going to click the add button. Anyways, trying to understand Sleep's comment here. Congrate on Liverpool FC. Not sure what the reference to Liverpool is. That's quite an accent, though. So, anyways, while I'm just waiting on that answer, I'm just going to ramble for a minute here. If anyone has never... most of my listeners are ESL, and one of the interesting... This is just totally off-topic rambling. One of the interesting things about English language, like many other languages, is you'll get so many different variations on accents. So I'm Canadian, so my accent is pretty similar to American. But again, even in America and Canada, you'll have places which have very, very different accents. But I have quite, I would say, slightly more neutral accent. But if anyone's ever heard like a fucking, heard a fucking thick Liverpool accent. I can't even do the Liverpool accent, but it just sounds insane. And earlier, a couple days ago, I was just watching this video of this heavyweight boxer from Liverpool named David Price just having a swearing fit at this other boxer, and it's just some of the funniest stuff ever to hear. It's like a special version of English. Okay, so we got the answer. I never did tests, but I already Googled it a bit. Okay, so a couple things that I'm going to suggest, Mike. So the first thing, let me just pull up an article here. So I'm going to give you some homework. So I wrote an article. I'll paste it into the description box here. So what this article is, it's basically an introduction to testing and test-driven development. So here's the thing. Normally when you Google testing, you're going to be just completely overwhelmed because people are going to say, use this library, use that library, and they're not actually going to teach you what the fundamental process of writing tests is. It's very rare that people actually teach you that. So hopefully I'm going to save you a whole bunch of headache that I had to go through. Here is what testing is, and this is before I get to showing you how to test a Model View Presenter. This is the most important thing you need to grasp. Testing is really simple. The tools we write tests with aren't always simple, but testing itself is conceptually very simple. So to show you just basically like a pseudocode example. Okay, so we have some class. So here we have just a console calculator. So what it basically does, it's just a binomial expression calculator. And so it works on this object called an expression, so some kind of data model, which has an operand and two operands and an operator. And then all it really does is we just give it this. It has one function, so this is important. One entry point into the object here. So this is what we're basically going to be testing. And what we want to know is we want to make sure that when we give this function or class or object or whatever some particular data model, or we just call some function on it, we want to verify what it does when that happens is the fundamental of testing. We're basically testing behavior and state. So, okay, I think this is more the example that this is basically what it's going to look like. So you're going to have the class which you want to test. So I'll show you an Android example in a minute. I'm just showing you like a simple micro example here just to introduce it, and then I'll show you some more practical info here. But so we have some class that we want to be tested, the thing or unit that we want to test. And how do we make sure that it works? We give it some data. We write tests for it. So I don't need any frameworks or anything to really test this thing. All I do is I basically, I'll call this function evaluate test. So evaluate test being, we call this function evaluate test with test data, so specific fake information. And then what that's going to do is we're calling the thing that we want to test with some data, and then we're recording the result of that function. and then we check the expected value. So we give it 2, 2, and plus. Then we verify that the result of that calculation is 4. Of course, we give it 2, 2 minus. We verify that the result is 0. So what I'm just showing you here is, before we get into testing frameworks, just understand the actual process of testing is we have some object or function that we want to make sure it works how we expect it. We want to make sure that 2 plus 2 equals 4. The way that we do that is we give it test data, and we see what result it spits out, what value it returns, or what functions it calls after that, that kind of thing. So this is supposed to be like a really simple introduction to testing. So I do suggest you read this article. It'll pretty much explain the fundamentals here. Now, how do we test? So the question was, oops, I just accidentally opened Spotify. So the question was, how do we test MVP or Mvvm projects? Do I test separately the view, presenter, and data manager? Okay, so first thing, number 1. Yes, all individual objects should be tested separately against fake dependencies and data. So let's get into some code so I can show you what I'm actually talking about here. So going to Kotlin Mvp Calculator on GitHub, I'm going to first show you really quickly what the presenter looks like. So this is a model view presenter project. And in this model view presenter project, it has this function called onEvent. And you'll notice all of my presenters generally speaking, have this function. So it's like an entry point into all the things that the presenter does. And what's going to happen is the view is basically going to call back to this presenter with some kind of view event. So this is Kotlin sealed classes. So what I'm trying to do here is, this is just an aside here, a cool little pattern. Every event that can occur in the view, I've created a sealed class out of it. So we have this view event thing, and it has different states, like on start, on evaluate click, on delete click, and then it calls each successive function, and then it does whatever it needs to do. So my goal for, say, testing this presenter is where we'll start answering your question here. I basically want to cover all of these different events in tests. So that should give you a rough idea of what the presenter looks like. Only things to note here is we're working with coroutines, so that changes what things look like in the test a little bit. But so we'll kind of leave that there now. Okay, so we've created, or I've shown you the presenter. Now we're going to go to the source folder and the test folder. So just again, a little bit of information. When you have a new project in Android Studio, you're generally going to see, I'm not sure if it's in here because I might have deleted it. You're generally going to have, okay, yeah, I think I deleted it, a test package, and then a main package, and then an Android test package. Let me see if this one has the Android test. Yeah, this is what it normally looks like. Main, test, Android test. So Android test is where you will put espresso tests. Now this is where things get wonky. I don't really use espresso, and I'll have to get into that why, because I'm trying to give you like basically an hour-long introduction to testing in a few minutes here. But for unit testing, which is what I'm going to be showing you, that goes in the test package, the test source directory, not the Android test directory. So this is for like UI tests. There are reasons why I don't really do those, but I do test my UI indirectly, so yeah. So going into the test package in Kotlin Mvp Calculator, we have this collection of test files. So the one we're going to look at is calculator presenter test, which tests the calculator presenter that I showed you earlier. Now, remember what I said. When we want to test something, we give it fake data and fake dependencies. So what is this crap? So let me open up the presenter proper again, the real one. And okay. So when you're testing a class, what you're going to need to do, and this is the whole point of dependency injection, basically, if you've ever wondered why do we do dependency injection, this is the primary reason. It basically allows for easy testing. So as you can see, my presenter talks to the view model, and the backend. Just consider this to be the backend, and then ignore this dispatcher thing. This is just for coroutines. So it uses these objects. So when we're running the actual application, then what we're going to do is we're going to give this thing the real classes behind an interface is the key here. But we're going to give it the real view, the real fragment, the real view model when the program is actually running. When we're testing, we don't do that. When we're running unit tests, instead what we do is, so there's different approaches. So here's where it gets a little more complicated. I know I'm overloading you with information, but there's so much information to cover here, it's tough to summarize. So we can either give this class, basically, we can use what just happened here? We can use a mocking framework, which will create fake versions of the view, and then we create our presenter with mocks, basically. Or what we can do is we could, if you don't want to use a mocking tool, you could actually just create your own fake class. So I could do something like in my, so here, so let's say I want to test this class. So this class is called alarm detail logic. It's like a presenter, a little bit different. If I wanted to test this thing without a mocking framework, here we're using mock-k, what I could do is I could just create like a fake class that extends this same interface, and then I could give the presenter or the logic class or the view model the fake version. So that would require actually going like creating a new file, class, fake alarm detail view, extends alarm detail view, and then that allows me to then pass in the fake version. So there's two different approaches there. I generally like to use a mocking framework, but you don't have to really. It kind of depends a bit on personal preference. Okay, so the way we test a class is we give it fake actors to talk to, fake dependencies, and then we create basically data which we expect. So when on change, so when the user hits a button, we call on changed, and we want to make sure that the presenter calls on the thing it talks to, the fake thing, set display. So what the general gist of things here is, whether you're using a mocking framework or you're handwriting your verifications, you're gonna tell your whatever class you're testing to do something, and then you're going to check what the result is. In general, that's always what you're doing with testing. So with a mocking framework, we can not only, for example, make sure that some dependency was called with a particular particular value, but we can just ensure that this function was called. So what I'm talking about here is let me just show you this on changed function. So when is onChanged called? Okay, so stupid name there on my part. So this is actually when onStart is called. So when onStart is called, we go to this onStart function, and typical Ryan, I picked like the worst poorly named test to start with here. Let's actually look at this one. Okay, so here we're testing again the similar idea here. So we're just giving our calculator some particular value and seeing what happens. So I don't know what the hell is going on with this test. I think I just screwed that one up because I don't even have an onChange function, so that's garbage. Okay, so test valid expression, test valid answer. So we're calling the real function viewEvent.onEvaluateClick. So we call that, and then that's going to show up in our presenter here. OnEvaluateClick. In OnEvaluateClick, we want to make sure that the presenter is asking the view model for the current state of the view, so whatever is displayed, and then that's what we'll eventually give to the backend. We want to make sure that it's giving the backend the test expression. Notice here when we call this view model.getDisplayState, we're returning test valid expression. Now I'm just talking about Mvp implementation details here, but we're verifying what this behavior is this presenter is doing. Let me just summarize it like this. Testing is about verifying the behavior and state, so that's like data, that's like checking the expression of some class, function, or even module in certain cases. So you're just seeing what does it do and what does it do to the data. I think that's as much as I'm going to ramble about this topic, because there's just too much for me to explain simply. But what you can do, so I have a lot of content on testing. So if you want an introduction to testing from my channel, then what you're going to do is you're going to want to basically go to, so I believe it's called Test-Driven Development with Kotlin. Sleep says real man test in production, lol. Yeah, great English there, buddy. So yeah, Space Notes, my test-driven development process is basically displayed here, and this is how I do things in production code. So the reason why I didn't jump to production code is because I'm explaining it to a beginner. So just so you understand that, sleep. So anyways, yeah, if you want an idea of how I do it in production, then you can check out basically any one of my recent repositories that are open source, and you'll see basically the same setup here. So kind of finishing this question off, so how do you test a MVP or Mvvm project? So yes, you do test everything separately. You want to test each individual part of your structure to make sure that the whole thing works properly. MVP is easier to test, and the reason why is because if you're doing MVP properly, then the presenter will not have basically too many Android dependencies, whereas if you're working with view model and Mvvm, then you're going to have kind of a different situation going on. You're going to have tight coupling to the Android framework. So if you're doing that, then you're going to have to set up a whole bunch of stuff. So this is an Mvvm project, and so if you want to be testing view models, you're going to have to basically learn, I think there's specific test rules and libraries which you can look, which the Android team have created in order for you to actually be able to test these things. And then for testing like views, you're going to be using pretty much Espresso. I don't really do any of that stuff. What I actually do in my production code is I follow, to make testing easier, I follow basically a passive view / humble object approach. So basically what that looks like is you'll have all of the, say, logic, I'll have all of the logic of a particular feature more or less contained in an object that I actually just call logic, but you can pretend that it's also called presenter. And I'll just make sure exactly which actors it's calling and with what data. And then in the views, so let's look at maybe alarm detail view. Did I call it alarm detail fragment? There we go. And then in the views, I basically make them very simple. So we just have functions like set alarm title, set vibrate only, set renew automatically, the kind of stuff that I can test just by looking at it. And you won't see any significant complicated logic in my views. So this means I don't actually really have to use Espresso. Because generally speaking, what I would be testing is I would be testing if, for example, textView.setText is working properly. If it's not working properly, then we're screwed because that's the Android framework failing. So anyways, like I said, there's a lot of different ideas and opinions when it comes to testing, and there's just too much for me to cover in a quick answer here. Because what I should have focused on is just introducing the basics of testing, because it's already kind of complicated to understand the basics of testing, and then when we get into how do we test MVP versus Mvvm, it gets a lot more complicated, because if you do it my way, you don't need a lot of frameworks. If you do it the way the Android team typically encourages you, which is to test your fragments and test your view models and use all of their different testing libraries because they want you to use their libraries, because that's like a big part of what people get paid to make on the Android team. You can go that route, and that's not really what I advise for people, but it really just depends. So, anyways, so Gorilla Gaming asks, where can I share my problem in description? So like I said before, if you can host your project on a repository that I could check out, you could do that. If you're on the Slack channel, you could post it there. Yeah. So, anyways, is there any other questions? Hopefully there's some useful information in there, Mike. The problem is, like, I literally could talk hours about testing, as you just saw there. So it's tough because the way I would explain testing really depends on the person's skill level. If you don't have much experience with it, and I just start talking about how to set up mock K and test your model view presenter architecture and all that stuff, it's kind of like just too much information, because not only am I explaining the process of testing, and I didn't even talk about test-driven development, but then I also have to explain to you how mock K works and how JUnit works and all these different things. So it's just really tough to explain shortly. But like I say, I have a lot of content on my channel, and so check it out. So, anyways, I'll hang around for a little bit longer. Again, to go completely off topic, I'm wondering, did anyone else catch the heavyweight fight last night between Anthony Joshua and Andy Ruiz? That was quite an upset. Suddenly this is a boxing stream, but this is just what I feel like rambling about. I don't know what was... So, I'm... As far as like a fan, I'm a big fan of both Anthony Joshua and Tyson Fury. I don't know what was going on, but it kind of seemed like AJ was not on that night, and I was just noticing before the fight that he didn't look that well, and it was kind of weird for him to be like leaning on the ropes just before the fight and getting his neck massaged and stuff like that. It just kind of seemed like he had something going on, and sure enough, Andy Ruiz turned out to be actually kind of a hell of a puncher. So it was a pretty awesome fight. Pretty sad to see AJ lose, but he lost to the better boxer on that night. So, anyways, so Gorilla Gaming, if you want, join our Slack channel, and you can post the issue there, and then I can maybe help you. Oh, looks like he's got a solution. Or host your stuff on a repository, and I can check the actual code, but that's basically it. So I'm just going to ask final call, any more questions? And if not, I will be calling it a day. Anyways, I'll just ramble for a moment. So I've been working on this POS Trainer application, and it's been an absolute nightmare because I just cannot get the application to wake up properly. Okay, looks like Guerrilla Gaming has got it figured out. So I changed the Gradle version to 3.32. I think I mentioned something about ensuring that you have the latest Gradle build tools version, but that's slightly different than Gradle version, so fair enough. And the problem is solved. Sweet. All right, that's going to be it for today. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. And yeah, we'll see you when I finally figure out how to do wake locks on Android Oreo, because I tell you, it's been really annoying. So anyways, thanks for watching, everyone, and peace out.